So I got a little rushed at the end of that last video. Let me start here with the 4-string pattern for the tone center again for Ionian. So again, that comes out of the 4-string pattern for the full scale. But if I just play intervals 1, 3, 5, and 7, finger-wise, that's 4, 3, 1. I have to shift down to get the 7th interval. So 1, 2, 4, 3, 1, shift down, 1, 2. Now it's probably going to be a little bit easier to do this with your fingers. 4th finger, 3rd finger, and then use your 2nd finger to get this 5th interval down here so that you don't have to double up on your 1st finger. So a bit of a stretch, but a little bit easier way to do it up here. So that same fingering, adjust for tuning on different roots, but here's the same fingering for the tone center. Tuning makes it easier. Okay, down here on this G. Let's see, I skipped one. Part of one there. Also here. So tuning adjustment comes right away. So you do that on all of the roots. So you've got the 3-string pattern for the tone center that you're doing on all the roots, the one that I just showed you on all of the roots, and then you're going to put them together. You're going to alternate them within a full position to get the entire position of the tone center. Again, these are all illustrated in the book, and it's going to save you a lot of time since everything is diagrammed out. However, here they are. Here's the full position, everything alternating, partial patterns, the whole deal. Tone center for G Ionian down here. Okay, the next position. Now, until you get better at these, it's going to be easier to start on a root where you can see the octave. When you get better at it, you can start. For example, this one actually starts on the 3rd interval over here. But until you get better at it, start where you can see an octave finish. So. Next position. Next. And the last one. So get all of those together so that you're very, very comfortable and confident playing them. Again, tone center intervals, always the strongest sounding intervals in a scale. You want to make dead sure you know where they are when you're soloing. Okay. Then you're going to solo on nothing but the tone center. The same thing we did with Dorian. You just go up and down the neck, messing around on the notes, nothing but the tone center. Just get comfortable with, excuse me, mixing the notes around a little bit, but just the tone center. Okay, then you're going to add in the 2s, 4s, and 6s, just like with the Dorian scale. So here, oh, the other thing, if I didn't mention this, there are 2 new interval shapes that you have to memorize for this scale. In Dorian, we had a flat 3 and a flat 7. Everything else was natural intervals. In this scale, we have a natural 3 and a natural 7. So the shape of a natural 3rd, from the root, your 3rd looks like that. So on the adjacent string, down 1 fret from where the root is. Okay, and it doesn't matter if you're in a 3 or a 4-string pattern, it's going to look the same. The 7th, it skips a string from the root and goes up 1 fret. Or you can think of it, it's a half step below where that next, my fingers out, a half step below where that next root is going to be your 7. So So it looks like that, but when you do this in the 4-string pattern, it's a big stretch. Sorry. All right, so it's skipping 2 strings and going down 1, 2, 3, 4 frets. It's probably one of the biggest stretches, interval-wise, that you'll have to look for on the guitar. All right, so that's what your 7th looks like. If I do it here, tuning. All right, so make sure you see those, that natural 3 and the natural 7. Next, as I was saying, we're going to have the 2, 4, and 6. These intervals look the same as in Dorian, related to where the root is. So my root is here. There's my 2. Again, I can find my 2, my 2 by going down 3 frets on the adjacent string. My 4 is going to look the same as it did in the Dorian scale, but remember, in the Ionian scale, you can't stay on this note. It's an unresolved interval. You have to resolve it by going down a half step to 3 or up a whole step to 5. Later, we'll talk about a more advanced way of using an unresolved interval called delayed resolution. At least that's what I call it. But for now, you definitely, the minute you play it, and you shouldn't stay any longer than 1 second, or 1 beat rather, whatever your tempo is, don't stay on the 4 for longer than 1 beat, or it's going to probably start to sound like a wrong note. So practice that when you're doing the 4s. The 6s look the same as they did previously in the Dorian scale. So all of that over a G major 7 tape. You do them each individually. Same process. All right. Excuse me. Now we're going to talk about the blues scale relationships to the Ionian scale. So those 3 blues scales that we identified previously when we were looking at Dorian, A blues, B blues, and E blues. And again, initially, A blues is coming from the A Dorian scale, B blues is coming from the B Phrygian scale, and E blues is coming from the E Aeolian scale. And we discovered through a little bit of analysis that each of those, the notes anyways, that make up each of those 3 blues scales exist within the Dorian scale. Well, they exist within every scale in the key. So these 3 blues scales are an option no matter what scale in the key that you're playing. They're always ideas that you can use. And again, the good news is, if you did the last scale properly and you learned the positions for where A blues, B blues, and E blues are, you don't need to relearn them. You're simply going to take the same fingerings you know how to do, and they're going to take on an entirely different sound in the context of this different scale. So I'm going to hold up a similar diagram here, but this is all related to Ionian up on the top. So again, all the natural intervals and the names of the notes up on top, and we look at A blues, and we can see that we're playing A, C, D, E, and G, but from the Ionian scale, that's intervals 2, 4, 5, 6, and 1. Now remember what we've talked about previously with the 4 in this scale. That C note, the 4, is unresolved. So what that means is you're not going to hear anybody use the idea of playing an A blues scale over a G major 7 chord. It's not going to happen. Why? Because it sounds unresolved. It's going to sound like you're playing a wrong note. If we go underneath that and look at B blues, the notes B, D, E, F sharp, and A, they are the intervals 3, 5, 6, 7, and 2 out of the Ionian scale. So it's a very usable sound. E blues, the notes E, G, A, B, and D. The intervals 6, 1, 2, 3, and 5. Now in reality, that's just a G pentatonic, G major pentatonic scale. If I start on that G root now, I'm looking at the E blues thing again, but I'm skipping over to the second note, G. That's really the root, because our chord is G major 7 here from the G Ionian scale. So really what you're playing is 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6, which is a major pentatonic scale. We're going to talk about this in a little bit more detail later. Each blues scale actually makes up the notes in a major or dominant, depending on the case, pentatonic scale. But don't worry about that at the moment. We'll talk about that later. So underneath, we got the balance of tone center and colors, just like I illustrated with the Dorian scale. Again, A blues, it's got that 4th interval in there. Not a good idea to use over G major 7. B blues, sounds great. There's no root in it. right? You have the intervals. You have 3 tone center intervals, 3, 5, and 7, plus the colors 6 and 2. So there's no root in there. And you're going to find what happens is that gives you a very open, for lack of a better term, sound. Just, it doesn't sound real anchored. It's kind of like a nice floating kind of a sound. E blues is just G major pentatonic, which we'll get into detail maybe a little bit later in the next video. But simply, to put it simply right now, if you just play the notes that make up E blues, you are playing the notes that make up G pentatonic. All right? So what I'm going to do is just demonstrate these 2 blues scale ideas. Well, I'll play them all 3, and you can hear that A blues is very unresolved sounding. So here are the blues scale ideas. Just quickly again, I'm not going to do big, long things. So let me start with E blues, which is really G pentatonic. And I'll do it up here in a position maybe everybody's more familiar with. So if I play this position, which most guitar players know, even though I'm thinking of that as E blues, it's really G pentatonic because G is the root of this chord we're playing. So that's the root. Now hopefully you can hear that that's the root and not this E note. That's actually the 6th of what we're playing. But the good news is, if you know your positions for E blues, then you already know how to play the full positions for G major pentatonic. Okay, it's very standard sound. Very standard sound. A blues. All right, here's the one you never hear anybody do. Pretty obvious why. That C note sounds horrendous, right? So nobody's using A blues. Here's the B blues. And again, I'll just do these in positions where visually maybe everybody can see what I'm doing a little bit easier. So remember, there's no root in this. Right? So it's got that open type of a sound to it. That's about it for this video. See you in the next one. Here's an addendum to what I was talking about. Another thing that you can practice with Ionian. The same thing that we did, the same type of thing that we did with Dorian, where we took the blues scale, played it for 10 or 15 seconds, and then added in the other 2 notes to get a more melodic sound. Well, you're going to find that each scale in the key, with the exception of Locrian, has its own pentatonic scale, its own 5-note scale that you can play from. So with Ionian, we have G major pentatonic, to which you could add the interval 4 and 7 and get a more melodic sound. So what I'm going to do is just demonstrate this for a second. I'm going to play G pentatonic for a couple of seconds. When you do this, 10-15 seconds on each idea. I'm going to go a little shorter here. But I'm going to be doing G pentatonic, and then I'm going to be adding in all the notes for a more melodic sound. That was all of the notes. Now I'll go back to pentatonic.